No, we're not recording yet. I hope that's okay with you. All right, now we can start. All right, come on, baby. Here we go. So this is day 1 of 4 full days. Whoops. Okay, now wait a minute. Hold on. Geez, could we have any more problems today? No, we couldn't. Let's just see. We don't want it to move itself. We don't want it. Slide. Where is that? Slideshow.
While Julie's working on that, I should say, Bashar, I apologize because I just knocked over my water bottle all over your keyboard. So.
Oh. Okay, no problem. I'm sure it's fine. They make these keyboards to handle that, right? Okay, hang on one quick second. I'm having more technical difficulties than any one person should have to have on this whole thing. All right, let's see. Hush up. It's ringing at me. Hide PowerPoint, show, start. Come on, baby. Oh my goodness. All right, this will be very interesting. Hold on, I'm going to stop.
The EHV vouchers. I want to let everybody know that they already booked them up. There was 100 open vouchers, and they're already gone. Took less than a week, which was really awesome if you think about it. Considering a lot of continuums throughout the country probably will be giving back vouchers. We are definitely ahead of the curve. But on that note, SHS funding is going to be rolling out. There's going to be a lot more boots on the ground doing this work. You might be one of those boots on the ground doing this work. So we want to prepare all of our new case managers, including you, into really knowing how to do the landlord navigation process, working with property managers, best practices in case management, and long-term retention support. I just said a whole lot.
You
Julie,
did.
I was just told that the chat is on. Everybody should have the ability to chat. They have to click on the chat button on the. Are you guys getting a chat button? Does anybody else see a chat button?
No.
No, I think
Not
you
chat
have
box.
it. You have it, but we don't.
Okay.
I see the button, but when I open up the chat window, it says chat's disabled.
Same.
Okay, well, we'll fix that tomorrow. It's like Scarlett O'Hara. I'll think about that tomorrow because we don't want to cut into your time here any longer. So, good morning again. So, oh gosh, oh gee, oh whiz. Okay, this is not a good thing, what it's doing. All right, I'm sorry, folks. This is highly unprofessional, but we're going to go with it.
So Julie, while you're doing that really quickly, I also want to say that kind of just to follow up on what Alex was saying is that when we're putting all of this together, we're also very aware of the fact that we have many experts in this training, a lot of people with a lot of experience, and then probably some people with who have less experience. And I think that this is an opportunity, even just going through this process, I feel like I've either been reminded of things that I want to apply to how I go about my providing services and support to folks, and also learning some new things. So I think it's a good opportunity for all of us, and it's just also a reminder that we're going to cover some things where people have a lot of expertise already, and we're going to ask you all to contribute in that to the discussion. So
thank you for that, Jeff. That's awesome of you. Thank you. Okay. Can you see my screen? No.
No.
Okay. Let me just try to fix that for a second. Go. Okay, hold on. I'm going to exit this show again. You guys wouldn't know I've been doing this like every day for the last 18 months, would you? It's quite shocking to see such a really incredibly unprofessional operation.
We can see it now.
Thank you. Let's see if we can do this without it moving itself. Okay, here it comes. Black screen. There we go. So what we're gonna, wow. Wow, 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 wow. Okay, stop right here. No, it's not stopping. Here we go. Let me do this. Here we go. I'm gonna try these little guys. Okay, this is the overview of the series. So we're going to be not just today, but over the course of the next 4 days, if you come back after this wonderful beginning, we're going to be talking about Homelessness 101, pre-housing search work, housing search and identification, building the relationship with the landlord, providing tenancy supports and landlord supports, and then not just landlord retention, but landlord and our participant retentions. And then the Washington County Housing Authority may come on with a little bit of stuff about the EH fees. So normally, okay, stop it. Oh my goodness. I'm going to skip the polls. So here we go. No, I'm not going to let me do it, are you? Okay. This is the agenda for today. We're going to start out with 101 homelessness. That isn't because we think that you don't know anything about this, but because we all want to be on the same page, okay? We want to do some level setting. So, you know, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, assuming that we have a lot of people who know this already. But if you're new and you don't, and you want to ask questions, like I said before, there will be an opportunity for you to, we'll take a pause and you'll be able to ask questions. So, and then we're going to go into talking about engagement, right? How we engage with the participants that we're working with, because that is the biggest part of our work. Most important part of our work is to develop that relationship. So for right now, just a reminder about one of my sheroes, Angela Davis. You know, she always has reminded us that we need to keep ourselves deeply connected to the folks with whom we're working, and remember that we are working with them as equal partners if we really want to be successful. So I like to start out Homelessness 101 by acknowledging what you already know, and that's that we're in a housing affordability crisis in this country, and it has deep, deep roots, okay? So this slide is showing you where there was little housing, affordable housing in 1980. And you could see up and down the West Coast primarily, and around New York State and in Southern Florida, but most of the rest of the country didn't have huge problems with housing affordability. But that has not lasted. So this is in 2000. That's a big switch, isn't it? I'm just going to show you that again. Right? There's 2000. It really starting to grow towards the center of the country. And here's 2014. It's now, I couldn't find, somebody stopped making these slides, these maps, so I couldn't find the whole thing. It's safe to say now that we are now full-fledged in a total housing affordability crisis in this country. And it's because we have not invested in affordable housing at any great level in more than 20 years in this country. Like, it is just not something that we have done. So to share with you some data from Oregon and locally, what I like to look at when I'm thinking about this affordability crisis and understanding why our work is so A, important, and B, really hard, is understanding what the possibilities are. So if you look at this chart here, the pie, this is telling you who the extremely low income renters are in Oregon, okay? So what are they doing? Some are retired, some are employed, some are seniors, some are single caregivers, some are disabled, okay? But you can see that 30%, almost the largest one, are employed. So a third of the people who have extremely low incomes. And when we talk about extremely low incomes, we're talking about people who have an income of 30% or less of the average median income in Oregon, okay? And then if you look at this next chart here in the middle, these are addressing the issue of how much housing is affordable and available, okay? So if you look down here, these are the extremely low income people that we were talking about over here, right? So those with an income of 30% or less. There are only 25 units in the state of Oregon available for every 100 people who fall into that category. And it doesn't get a whole lot better when you go up to the 50% AMI, 44 units per 100 renters. So that tells you if you're having a hard time finding rental housing for your participants, there's a reason for that, okay? And then this one is really useful because those of you who've been in this for a while or know about the Section 8 program, which we now call the Housing Choice Voucher Program, or public housing, you know that the standard is if somebody has to pay, they only have to pay 30% of their income towards rent, right? And that's supposed to be the standard. But except for those two programs, as well as the HUD-VASH program and any other really designed just to be affordable, nobody is paying that little for their income for their housing. And I would bet that that's true for you all as well, that you are paying far more than 30% of your income towards your housing. So right here, in the extremely low income, this again, 30% or below of the average median income, 87% are paying more than 30% of their income, and 77% are paying more than 50% of their income. So when you're trying to find a place for people to live, please, you will already keep them out of housing if you only look for them being able to pay 30% of their rent, right? Unless they're involved in a voucher program, right? So if they're an EHV or your supportive housing program that you guys have funded now, that is the beauty of the work that you're going to be doing. Most of your people will be paying 30%. But if you're working with people who are in rapid rehousing, for example, the chances of them finding a unit where for the rest of their lives, they'll be able to only pay 30% of their income when you no longer are helping are not very good, okay? So here's your MSA, your Metropolitan Statistical Area Affordability Statistics. So of renters who have an income of 30% of the average median income or below, you have 79% are severely rent burdened, and they pay more than 50% of their income, right? And here's this figure again, the 20 out of 100, which means you have almost 17,000 fewer units than you need, okay? And then for those who are in 50%, it's 30 per 100. So we're in a really tight situation. And thank goodness that you passed that affordable housing and homelessness assistance program that you did, because it puts you in a lot of places compared to other communities in a much better situation. So switching gears to talking a little bit about why do people become homeless? And one of the things I want to say about this is a myth, right? Mental illness and drug addiction are the root causes of homelessness. That's not how we talk about it, but that's how people in the community talk about it, right? So they believe that most people become homeless because they have a mental illness or a drug addiction. But we know that's not true. That really what leads to homelessness is economics. And part of economics is lack of housing, right? So let me ask you if you would be willing to unmute yourself and just call out what you think are the root causes to homelessness. Anybody at all?
Trauma.
Thank you. Anybody else? You can do
Lack
it.
of livable wages.
Say that again, not livable wages. Is that what you said, Alex?
Lack of livable wages.
Terrific. Thank you.
We always have the medical crisis.
Medical crises. Okay.
That's what I was just going to share, or job loss.
Job loss. Yep. Absolutely.
Unemployment.
Unemployment. Yep. Another economic factor, right?
Gentrification.
Yes, absolutely. Gentrification. Anybody else?
Education.
Education. Yep.
I think also generational.
Generational. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what you all are pointing out is that there are some very systemic things about what's going on these days that people end up becoming homeless. And I want to support you in that. So here are some things that we've learned, you know, over the decades, and we probably knew it before, but we, you know, weren't paying very close attention to it. So the incredible systemic racism in our country has really contributed more than anything else to homelessness across the country, because we actually have laws that were put into place that prevented a whole segment of our population, people of color, from being able to own property, which if you were able to own property, then you built up your economics so that then you could be in a position to protect yourself from things like a sudden loss of income or a sudden medical crisis or a mental health crisis or whatever. And, you know, it's just when you sit down and look at the history and look at the things that were put into place, like after World War II, when our government, the federal government, built all this new housing all over the country for the people coming back from the war, the men who had served in World War II, and other lower income people. When that new housing was built, it was specifically prohibited for people of color to be eligible for this housing. And that's not that long ago, right? That's not that long ago. And then after that, as we wrote fair housing laws and began to understand that we needed to make sure that we had laws that protected people's right to be able to be housed, then, as often happens, like is happening now with voting rights, what we do by passing a law that says you can't do this and you can't do that is that people who want to discriminate and find it more beneficial to them to discriminate, they create new laws or new practices to get around the laws, right? So redlining and exclusionary zoning became really commonplace all across the country. And as you know, this is still going on today, right? So it's super important as we're doing this work to remember this. You know, redlining, segregation, overcrowding, poor healthcare, all of these systemic parts of the way our country operates has really, really contributed to our homelessness crisis today, to the point that it is an incredibly severe crisis. So as we move forward and think about the work that you're doing and we're all going to be doing together, it's really important that we start by talking about housing first, because all of our programs are are grounded in housing first, right? Because we've learned this. One of the nice things we could say about being in homeless services, and Jeff and I were talking about this earlier this morning, is how much we keep learning. The more we go, the more we do, the more we pay attention to the effectiveness of our programs, the better we get. And, you know, it's really been over the last 20 years that we learned that if we tell people they can't get any housing if they became homeless, unless they take care of their sobriety or their mental health or get a job or whatever it is, that they're not going to be able to. And so what we learned through the practices that started in New York City and then started spreading across the country was that when we house people first, when we acknowledge that everybody has a right to housing with no preconditions, that after they're housed, then they can begin to work on those other things that may have contributed to or made their homelessness be even worse, right? But I also want to be super clear. Housing first is not anything goes and housing only, right? What really good housing first is housing plus services. And this may be a shift for some of you. When I first started in homelessness, I was right on the cusp of that shift. And I know that a lot of people had a hard time. Like at the shelter that I started to work at, you couldn't come in if you weren't sober. You couldn't come in if you had certain criminal backgrounds. That shelter, I'm proud to say, no longer has those requirements anymore. And so by having housing as the platform for where people can pursue their personal goals and improve their life, we are assisting them in being successful in housing. And then of course, and this is sort of the last slide in this 101, it's like COVID, right? Oh my goodness. As Jeff said, you know, this is an unprecedented time for all of us. It's a time when, in a lot of ways, it's very exciting because at least since the beginning of this new year, a lot of money has been coming out to communities to help address the housing crisis. In some ways, it's a little overwhelming. We've never experienced this before. You know, most communities aren't ready to get, you know, a couple $2 billion to help them. They don't have the staff. But the other thing is, it's unprecedented, is that, you know, we did get a nationwide eviction moratorium, but that's going away pretty soon. We have no idea what that's going to mean in our communities. And so it's super important that we're all ready and able to shift and really move in there and be able to help people. So I'm really proud to be a part of your work in this way and hope I can help you in just a little way. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears. But before I do that, let me give you an opportunity to ask some questions about that last section. Anybody? Just unmute yourself since for some reason I don't have a chat box. Okay, I'm going to keep going then. We're going to start by talking about the impact of homelessness on people, because that's another root issue that we have to be prepared to deal with. And that is the stress that people encounter, the trauma, as someone said earlier, that people encounter. So let me ask you, just unmute yourself and tell me, when you, let's say you have a person in front of you that you would describe as in the way that the first bullet reads, a man who's experiencing homelessness, who's 52, and he's late to his appointment, and he's complaining a lot, and he's irritable, and he's suspicious, and he doesn't want to talk to you, and he's argumentative and defensive and cynical, and he has liquor on his breath. What do you see? What do you assume about this person? Anybody at all? It doesn't make you bad. Can I say that?
He has sobriety issues.
He has, thank you, he has sobriety issues.
That maybe it's going to take be a little harder to earn his trust.
Great point, thank you. Carla?
That he's unhappy, that he's hurting.
He's hurting and he's unhappy. Right. Great. How about this next one? A woman, so she's age 25. She looks sad and she seems helpless and hopeless and panicked and crying, worrying. What about her?
She's experienced some trauma.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. Anybody else?
Julie, there's a weird echo.
Yeah, somebody may be unmuted. It's the only thing that I can guess. Okay. And the third one, a mother experiencing homelessness who's 21. She's apathetic, having difficulty concentrating, poor hygiene. Any thoughts about her? I think you guys are too smart for this game. I'm going to go on to the next one. So just remember that for a second. And this is an activity that I want to ask you to think about, okay? I want you to think about a time in your life, and I'm not going to ask you to share this, okay? But I want you to think about a time that is very difficult, was very important to you. You felt like you had no control over, and it lasted for more than a month. And I want you to think about how you felt and how you acted, okay? And while you're thinking about that, I want you to just think of which of these things you showed through your actions that you believe you were showing when you were in that experience. And just do a set of ticks for every one you experienced, okay? Just so you have a count of how many of these signs of stress overload you might have experienced. And then I'm going to show you another list. So just get that list, count those down, and then I'm going to show you another list. Okay, I'm going to show you the next list. So this is the kinds of behaviors that you may have exhibited. Count these down. And I want you to add them up. Okay, so tell me, maybe, do you know how to use the little raise your hand button on the bottom where it says reactions? Oops, stop doing that. Go back. Bad slideshow. Okay, there we go. Tell me how many you had. How many of you had 5 or fewer of those? Anybody? I can't see you all, so I'm just trusting that you're doing this. How many of you had between 6 and 12?
And we can also use the raised hand feature. That's great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Look at you all. Go, go, go. How many of you had 20? I know I did. Okay. So thank you for doing that. Those symptoms are the real deal, okay? Those are what happens to us, both physically and emotionally, when we are traumatized and stressed out. And what I love about this knowledge now is that this is really very new knowledge, and we can really use it to our benefit to help us with our engagement with our participants. And I'm going to give you a little neurology lesson here very quickly. So here we go. Ready? So this is what your brain looks like when you're feeling good, okay? So you see this part here, the prefrontal cortex in purple. That's the part of your brain that helps you make decisions and does problem solving and helps you keep track of what you're doing and all of that, okay? So you can see that's the part of your brain that's in charge when you're feeling good and you're feeling on top of your game. But when you're stressed out, look what happens. And this is so shocking to me the first time I learned this. What happens is, as a result of the fight or flight response, your amygdala is basically turned off. And so this part, your basal ganglia and your amygdala, I mean, your prefrontal cortex is shut off and your amygdala is in place. And those two sections are the ones that control your fight or flight, right? So think about that when you think about somebody who's sitting in front of you who is experiencing stress overload. So those conditions that, you know, when I said, what do you see when you see that person? I was trying to give you a hint of what we're going to be talking about here. So here's what's really important to know about. Stress absolutely affects executive function. So when those of you who've been doing this work for a while, and you're sitting in front of somebody and you've been engaged with them, and you say, we're going to go out and we're going to try to figure out what available housing there is. And you go look for that housing. You might give them that responsibility, which would be a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And they come back the next week and they haven't done it. The point becomes, well, maybe they just can't do it because their executive functioning is not in place, right? So I want you to remember that and keep that in mind for working with the folks you're working with. They can't, there's nothing they can do to fix it except resolve the stress. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But following through, overriding their impulsive behaviors, right? Modifying their behavior in response to new information and things like that. Executive functioning is everything that you need in a crisis, right? Right? But we may not be able to access that. So my point of showing you these people is that, but those of you who spoke up were very empathic and really got it, that they were traumatized. But what often happens when I do this exercise with less aware people is that they label them, right? They'll say, oh, well, he's probably got a substance abuse problem. She's probably got a mental health problem. She's probably got another kind of mental health problem. And rather than pathologizing people, what we really want to encourage you to do is to go with the flow and think about that trauma and that stress overload, and remember that we can help alleviate the stress, right? So here are some ways that we alleviate stress, right? One of them is to remove the stressor. So obviously the best thing to do for somebody who's homeless, who is stressed out, is to get them housed quickly, right? Another is to avoid creating more stressors for them, right? So if you've got a lot of things to do, think about, you're the one who's going to help set the stage that makes it easier or worse for them to participate in the activities that you need for them to engage in, right? So if going to see units is going to be incredibly stressful, then we need to go with them, right? If talking to a landlord is going to be more stressful, we need to go with them and help them prepare. And we're going to talk more about this later on. The other thing is helping them to de-escalate the lack of perceived control over the situation. And you do that by helping them to see that they can have control. So you give them tasks that you know or you think they can complete. Like maybe what you do is you look at some units online, you show them 3 units and you say, which of these do you like? What about them do you like? And you engage them in that process so that they begin to feel a little bit more in control, right? And then making lists and plans, but not too big, not too much, not too fast, and making sure they leave with notes in their hands or lists in their hands. And then, of course, we all know that our sleep and our relaxation and all those things also actually really do help. And just a little reminder to you that these strategies work for you. You're in a super stressful job, super stressful. And it's very important that you take the time to take care of yourself this way. So if we think about all the things that we could do to make our engagement with folks more successful, what comes to mind for you? Just shout it out. Anybody? I'll start giving you some ideas. Okay. So one of the things to think about is, how does my presentation to somebody help them feel safe and relaxed, right? We don't want to be on the phone, looking at our phone, doing 3 things at once. We want to talk slowly. We don't want to get caught up in their crisis. We want to keep breathing so that we can stay calm, which will help them to feel more calm. The other thing is, how do I recognize when somebody is being stressed out so that we can acknowledge that for them? Because as we acknowledge the fact that someone might be stressed, you may be telling them something that they have not touched base with at all. They may not have any idea that they're acting a way that shows that they're stressed out. And I have that experience often. So what I want you to think about is, what do you say or do or avoid saying that will help you to work with these people? And you're going to get these slides, by the way. And so that's why this is called a note to yourself, because sometimes it's helpful to just put some bullet points down and put it on your computer or on your desk or whatever as a kind of indicator to yourself about how to keep that in the front of your mind. And then how do you keep track of your own stress level, right? And one of the ways we do that is by talking with our colleagues and giving them permission to say to us, oh, you look like you're kind of having a rough day here. Want to go for a walk? I mean, I know you're not in the same place yet. Hopefully we'll be back, but you can even know on Zoom if it looks like somebody's feeling stressed out. And just, again, acknowledging that and giving them permission to take care of themselves is really important. So as a way to sort of wrap this up, we want to be observant. We want to pay attention to their ability to recall things. So if from one week you talked about, we're going to go look at 3 units, and the next week they don't remember, then that's going to be telling you something. So start with easy assignments. We're going to simplify the action steps. We're going to offer more direct assistance, like I talked about, going with them and going alongside them. And we're going to talk more about that. And write things down. When you agreed on an action step, write it down. When you have another appointment, write it down and give it to them at the end of the meeting. And you may need to remind them, right? Maybe give them a call or send them a text, whatever, so that they don't miss the opportunity for your next meeting to keep moving forward. So actually a bigger hero of mine than Angela Davis is actually Audre Lorde. And I just love this. And this is for you, okay? This is for you. I want you to really remember you need to take care of yourselves, and you need to think of that as an act of political warfare, because it's easy to succumb to all the stress that we face, right? And we need to stay strong and keep each other strong as well. Questions, comments, anything at all? People who have the hands up, you're not have your hand up to ask a question, right? You're just still responding to the last exercise. If you click on it again, it'll take your hand down. Any questions or comments? Nobody? Unmute yourself. See, this is the presenter's worst nightmare. Just to say that out loud, not to put any stress on you.
Can you go back to that last 2 screens?
Sure, I can go back to any screens. This one?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I just want to. Thanks.
You're welcome. And this one? You want to take a screenshot? That's my new favorite thing to do.
Oh, we can do that? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Screenshot.
you can take a screenshot. But you're going to get this quick.
Oh, thank you. Good.
Yeah, we're going to send these out to everybody.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay. Any other questions? That was such an easy one to answer. Thank you. All right, Jeff, I'm going to hand it over to you. Are you there?
Sorry, I thought I'd just respond like everybody else.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. So Julie already started really talking about, she was like leading up to this discussion about the importance of the relationships that we build with our participants. And so one thing, I don't know, even back, I don't know, like when I first moved here about 10 years ago, I remember putting on my resume or maybe in my cover letter that I feel like we're the type of work that we all do, working in social services, myself in behavioral health services, the type of work that we do is really centered around the art of relationship building and maintenance, or like fostering healthy relationships. And so one thing that I'm reminded of is that it's always been true that like the key concept for these processes and effectively working with somebody is really centered around that relationship that we build with them. For our teams, and really myself, our focus is really like we kind of center it around being person or client centered. We're also informed by from intentional peer support and the model there, and then also just supportive housing, which I feel like really emphasizes informed choice for individuals. And so with regards to like housing first model and the type of work that we do, it's really interesting because sometimes like I catch myself, or I think a number of us who do this work catch ourselves questioning like somebody's level of commitment, or you know, us thinking that we know what's best for the individual. And what I like about where I work now is that, you know, services are definitely, the services and engagement in services is really up to the individual. So whether we think that they are going to benefit from mental health services, or wow, you know, they could really use substance abuse treatment, the focus is really like, it's really up to the individual to make that choice on what they want to engage in. And so I think that puts the burden, the responsibility on us to really foster relationships that are built on trust, and also with respect to the individual, that they are like the center of their team, and we are here to help by offering like possible options and helping people to make informed choices in their life and supporting them in whatever choices they make. So when I think of services being voluntary, in one of our programs right now, and I've worked in programs where we actually had leverage over people, so we could, in order for them to keep their housing subsidy, we could have in the past I could have asked that they go in and do a drug test to show that they were clean and sober. And I like where the type of work that we do now, where that's not something that I would do. And I think that really this model that we would use, where everything is centered around the client or the individual and their choice, is super important. And again, that puts the responsibility on us to foster healthy and effective relationships with individuals. I am used to pacing around when I talk, so sitting here for this long has been a challenge already for me, so bear with me. And I always have notes in front of me, so if you see me looking down, I apologize. That seems rude. I think it's important, or we think it's important, just to remember that engagement is a process, not an event. It's something that we often talk about, whether somebody is actively engaged with us or not. And we really need to look at it from an individualized basis. It starts the day that we meet somebody and our first interactions with them. And it goes through the length of time that we have a relationship with them, sometimes even beyond the time that they're a participant, an active participant in our program. It should be based, like, what works for one person does not necessarily work for another person. And so really honoring where each person comes from, and being able to establish a mutual and genuine and authentic relationship with that individual is important to us. So, and one of the reasons that's super important is because the relationship needs to be built on trust. And this is a process that not only takes time, but it's something that I feel like we have to foster and keep working on over a period of time. And then sometimes, I know I've been guilty of doing things where maybe I'm not honoring a person's choice, and I'm really pushing my agenda and what I think is best for that person. And things like that can really jeopardize the relationship and cause issues of trust. So even in going through this is good reminders for myself, and the importance of the relationship and how I show up. And then for the participants, so when I think of how I show up, Julie already talked about how trauma and stress and experience impacts where a person is and what they're experiencing, and coming into a system that I work in and we all work in, where there's oftentimes already a level of distrust and also just a lot of heartache and disappointment for people trying to navigate our systems. And as somebody who works in the system, it's hard enough for me to navigate, so I can't even imagine what it's like for the other person. And sometimes it's easy to forget when I'm going through my day and I'm feeling really stressed out or overwhelmed because of everything I have to do, to really to be mindful of that, as well as to be honoring and respectful of where the individual is coming from. I think one thing that Julie's mentioned before to me when we were talking is that we can't expect conflicts and or tensions to arise in our relationships with folks, and that's okay. I think it's just working to address those things and realize they're inevitable and do what we can to make things work. So one of the things that we talk about is this concept of radical engagement. As it says up on the slide, radical engagement is doing whatever it takes. So taking the position that it is up to me to engage the participant and learn whatever I need to in order to build that solid relationship with the individual. And since services are voluntary, it makes it very critical and in housing first programs, it's important to remember, as much as some people may want to, or we may want to, we can't say that, like, if somebody's not engaging with us, or we see that something is not, like, they're not engaging or they're not showing up, it's easy to start thinking, well, they're not really buying into this, they don't really want this, when in fact they might, and we wouldn't be able to just say, you know, we're not going to work with that person because they're not showing up. So instead, what this does is it puts the onus on me as the provider to do what I can to reach out and engage, help that individual to engage in a way that meets, like, maybe our program expectations, but is also meeting their goals for housing. So engagement begins day one. First things to get to know is really like to have a genuine and an authentic relationship with the individual, and to talk to them, find out, like, have them learn about us, and for us to learn about them, who they are as a person, maybe a bit about their family life, what's happening with them right now, what their goals are, things that they like to do, hobbies, or things that they're really skilled at or good at. And then focus on the housing experience, rental history. And this is something that we oftentimes, I think myself included, we can really, we have a set process that I know for our teams, we have kind of a set process, and it's step-by-step on toward housing navigation. And it's easy for me to get caught up in the idea, like, maybe when we're first meeting somebody, we're doing the assessment, and just jump in and want to do an assessment instead of taking time to even start the process of developing trust with the individual and learning about them as a person, instead of completing the assessment or the form that I need done or the housing plan. And again, this is a piece that's been important for me to reflect on, and how I perform and what I do in my day-to-day interactions with folks. So with regards to focusing on housing, we do want to know what their experience was with rental housing, what's important to them, what their strengths and preferences are in regards to housing, what's worked in the past, what areas have they struggled in, and what are they looking for from us as the service provider, or in the terms we're using as case manager for housing. So we wanted to ask you all to can't chat, so to speak up and maybe give us some ideas or some of the engagement tips that you have. And if you don't speak up, I will call on you.
I can jump in. I think an engagement tip for me is to find something relatable with someone, either experience, or even if it's just like an activity, cooking, or, nature, something that you can kind of connect on a personal level.
Nice.
Great.
Hey Jeff, it's Alex. I know that when I was doing outreach, I spent the majority of my days sitting on the side of the curb with people. I always tried to make sure I was, eye to eye. I wasn't standing above people. If they were in a tent, I would frequently be sitting on their doorstep. Non-judgmental attitude, even if there was rigs and things are like lying there, I just talk to them like a normal person if we were like at the mall or whatever.
Nice.
Thanks, Alex.
I think open-ended questions are always a good way to get important information.
Absolutely. That's great.
Anybody else with engagement tips or even secret weapons?
Jeff, I'll tell you this, it sounds like a really cheesy secret weapon, but I always had socks in my backpack. I would sock up everybody. Like I was the guy that rolled with socks, and people love socks, man. I built some solid relationships, making sure people had dry feet.
That's great.
Nice.
I like the term sock up. That's good.
Thanks, Alex. And then what do you all do when you're having difficulty connecting with a participant?
Jeff, I'm going to be your wingman here, but I'm going to say consistency. If I had trouble connecting with a participant, I would just come the next day. I would come the next day. I was like, kind of like slightly like that annoying fly that just like won't leave the side of your ear until like they started to trust me.
Yep. Thanks, Alex. Anyone else?
I think in some ways it's going back to the drawing board a little bit for them, and maybe in discussions identifying the sort of the challenges and barriers that have come up, and maybe they're just not sharing. So going back to the also the MI or open-ended questions too. So
yeah, you know, it's a killer to just ask yes, no questions, right?
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, it's oftentimes too, just finding, I mean, just asking that question, like what's going on, and sometimes it may be something that the individual is going through, or sometimes it might be something that I've done, and through communication, we can make adjustments so that our relationship is good and they feel like they can trust me and reconnect.
Right. Great. Thank you.
So we were asking, when meeting somebody new, what are some of the behaviors that make a person feel comfortable and more receptive to talking, and those times when things make us feel less receptive? So obviously, like more receptive is when somebody is open and wants to hear what your opinions are. Somebody who listens to you.
Yeah, my name was.
Eye contact, and who focuses on your needs, as opposed to somebody who really pushes a point of view or displays body language where they show they're not interested, maybe distracted on the computer or with their phone.
Right, turn up the volume on your phone.
Or somebody who's pushing their own agenda, which is, again, something that I do feel like, I hope I don't do that all the time, but there are times where I become even just becoming mindful of the fact that we sometimes do this can be very helpful.
Great.
And I like this quote a lot from a staff member from the road home in Salt Lake City. In the past or before, we tried to change people. Now we support change in people. And for me, I think that I've actually gone through that, working in supportive housing and working in different programs. And I think with the Housing First model, it really is emphasizing that supporting change in people. And again, coming back to our role of like fostering a healthy working relationship with the individual, building trust, and also recognizing that they're in charge of their life and setting their goals, and we're here to support them and help them make informed choices along the way. So when we talk about doing strengths-based work, I think about it, I am somebody doing housing navigation who really, I actually, and I'm honest about this, I love the barriers. I love the challenges that people are facing. And I think getting to know that from my perspective is helpful, because we know what that individual is facing in terms of like possible challenges toward housing. I think it's important that we like really focus on what an individual's preferences are, but also what their strengths are and what they identify as their strengths. And I find, I don't know about you all, but I find that people are more, they struggle maybe a little bit more in general talking about or identifying their strengths. And I think when we develop, like, for example, a housing plan with somebody, and they're able to talk about their strengths, whether it's in their personal life or something that they do as far as maybe going to school or employment or a hobby or something specific to housing, what their strengths are. I feel like it is very empowering to the individuals, and it also like creates that framework for like how we're going to help that work with that person to overcome potential housing barriers. So strengths-based approaches is what we're really striving for. So
Can I interrupt for a minute?
Oh yes. No. Wait. No. If you're with Open Door, no way.
Okay. Goodbye. The positive things about the person and emphasizing that they, to empower them. I think that's really, really important. And our demeanor and our excitement and everything needs to come through at that point, because we're dealing with people that sometimes have been told they're not worth anything. They can't do this. They'll never amount to that, and all these things that are brainwashed into them in however situation they've been raised in. So they really don't believe that this is possible.
Right.
And so to try to get them, to trust you and establish relationships and things like that, we need to be excited for them. It's like, you can do this. Every day this week, I want you to do this one thing, and we'll talk next week or whatever it takes. But, I always try to talk to people and say, like, I'm excited to see what's going to happen in your life. I'm excited to see the changes that's going to make. And I think that, comes in on all these points. It's like we have to believe it or they're not going to believe it.
Absolutely.
So,
Such
sorry
a
to
great
interrupt.
point. No, that's such a great point. We do have to believe it, and it comes across if we don't. You're absolutely right.
Thank you. And I think that's that part too, like about just helping to instill hope, for that individual. And I think with this type of work, doing housing navigation, I don't know about you all, but I know that I find it to be, it's not only like it can be very challenging for us to work with somebody and to help them achieve their goals and acquire housing and then retain housing. There are often a lot of setbacks along the way. And I think helping people to have both, like to work with, like to have realistic expectations for what they're going to encounter. So I think being authentic and genuine and what the individual's facing in terms of, say, acquiring housing is important. But offering hope and walking side by side with that individual along the way to help them and really focusing on that strength and the success to celebrate or acknowledge like achievements. Like it could seem like something very small, but even like if somebody turns in an application for housing or they go in and talk to the landlord, maybe instead of me taking the lead when I'm out with them, the next time the individual takes the lead in talking to a prospective landlord. So
Love that.
thank you. So we wanted to ask you all to think of like the most challenging household that you've worked with and what were their strengths? Or maybe they didn't have any, I don't know.
Maybe you've never had anybody you would ever call challenging because you're so connected to strengths-based work that it never occurred to you to think of them that way. So then just share some strengths that you've observed in the folks with whom you're working.
think the desire to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Termination.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm just going to say a willingness to be vulnerable. I've seen that with people facing significant challenges and having to, for themselves, decide what to share with prospective landlords and whatnot, and when to do so. And even very painful life experiences that you can feel the emotion or observe the emotion that the person has.
Anyone else? I'm always amazed by people's resilience, how they can make things work, you know, and you look at what they've been through, and you just, you know, yourself, you might think, how did they do this? How did they get to where they are? And it's so powerful. Anybody else? Sarah?
I think for one of my clients, the challenge was the mental health needs that arose, but the strength over the time was knowing she could. Somebody mentioned about consistency, just being consistent through the whole process, knowing that she could trust me or trust the process, because for years and years, I think she did what was comfortable, or so it was helping her to even just identify even what her strengths were, and then also to sort of just to think big or think outside the box and know that, you know, there are options.
That's great. Thank you. That's great. Thank you. It's what helps us keep doing the work, right?
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're saying too about just trusting the process, and that's for that developing that trust relationship with that person, because as much as I find it like as frustrating as the process can be for me, I'm in a paid position to experience those things. This is this person's life and what they're experiencing. And so in spite of setbacks, if they can focus on their strengths and trust in the process, I think it's key.
Cool.
So with strengths-based approaches, we're really looking at like what's working for the individual as opposed to what's wrong. I really like the concept of discover and adapt to situations and to what the individual is going through as predicting and controlling. So, I mean, I've already heard in my language like about predicting. It's easy to kind of get into that because we can kind of, from our experience, kind of know what challenges an individual faces. But I think it's important to just like be flexible and work with them and also realize our sense of power and to really like borrowing from like an intentional peer support kind of concept to be able to identify power in the relationship with the individual and to negotiate power with them.
Great.
So anyway, emphasizing possibilities over focusing on weaknesses, being persistent and as opposed to resistant, looking at things as an opportunity, not just as a crisis. And again, like to celebrate success and not punish non-compliance. And I think that this becomes like a very big ethical issue, but where even if you have somebody who doesn't seem engaged the way we want them to not punish or not be dismissive of that person or like say that they're not going to be able to engage in the program, but to really look at ways that we can look at what our role is in that and help them to engage.
So anybody have questions? Thoughts? Comments? We're actually really near the end of this session. Partly, I think it went a little bit faster than it normally would because of our lack of a chat. So come back tomorrow and we will have a chat. Wednesday. Thank you, Jeff. Not tomorrow. Don't come tomorrow. Come Wednesday. Any questions, comments about this whole thing? Feedback for us? You will get a feedback form to fill out by email. So look for an email from me, Lee Steiner. And here on Wednesday, thank you. On Wednesday, we're going to be talking about the pre-housing search with participants. Like, how do we help prepare people for doing that search? And how do we help ourselves to prepare, really? So understanding people's strengths, like Jeff was just talking about, or talking about what are the barriers? What are the actual barriers? What do they think their barriers are to being successful in finding housing? And what do we know are going to be barriers based on what we know about some landlords, right? So that's what we're going to focus on tomorrow and or Wednesday, and you should come. I'm having trouble with Wednesday. And you should definitely come because this part about talking about strengths and barriers is probably a very new way for you to think about it. And I'll be interested in hearing what you think about what we present on that. So before we go, I'd love to hear from you. We were going to have you put this in the chat, so maybe it's a little bit harder to just unmute yourself and share, but if you're willing, if you feel like you trust us and the other people there, to coin a phrase, based on what we talked about today, is there anything that you think you'll do differently in the next week?
Then I think it's really just what I will focus on is more of being mindful of that engagement piece and my interactions, and really focusing on building that initial trusting relationship.
That's great. Thank you. You know, we get so sometimes we get a little in our zone, right? Our little automatic zone. And when we've had these long assessments that we have to do with people, you know, you kind of fly into them. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. Pedro, did you want to say something?
That was an accidental unmute.
No such thing. It was subconscious. That was a subconscious unmute. You want to share something with us? No,
it was a Freudian slip.
Okay.
But no, I'm all right.
Please.
That quote, it's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. I think that's really important because I worked for an organization taking intake calls over the phone. They were calling initially with their situation. It wasn't homelessness, but some other things. And when you're listening to the person talk and the tone of their voice, it's like you can't form a different opinion than what you would if you saw something on a street corner. And so you're more attentive, and I think that's what we're calling to be, is more attentive to what the person is saying, not what's standing in front of us, or the situation that comes to us and what they bring with them, but just really listening to the person. I liked what Jeff said, I can't remember actually, about just sitting on the corner and talking to people. Yeah. A lot of people just don't have that person to listen, and that means a lot to people.
Sure does. Thank you. I love that. Anyone else? Okay. Well, I will say thank you very much for putting up with all of the goofiness this morning. I hope you're planning to come back on Wednesday. You saw the list of things that we're going to be talking about over the course of the week, and we find it exciting, as Jeff said, but and we hope you will find it helpful. So thanks for being here, and we'll see you on Wednesday. Thanks a lot. If you have any questions you want to talk about, we'll be on for a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're done.
Thank you.
Salvation Army. Oh, she hung up.
See, all
How
these-
are things at Open Door?
Jeff.
I've been talking about Open Door. I was trashing Open Door earlier, Robin. Sorry. They're off, huh?
They're muted.
Okay.
I'm just going to, those of you who aren't paying attention, I'm closing you out. Just so you know, don't be surprised. It's not that I don't love you, but there we go. There we go. Now they're gone. All right. Okay, Alex, you're muted. How do you feel, Jeff? You didn't sound the least bit anxious. I just have to say that to you. And Jeff,
We still have more people on here.
we do? Oh, okay.
Never mind. We're good.
Sorry. Thought I couldn't see.
No, we're good now. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry about the chat thing.
I don't know what that was.
Went in and she's like, it's turned on. I went in and it was turned on. Everybody went in and it's turned on in the background. So I don't know why it's not coming up.
Well, I will figure it out. I'll tell you that. I promise. I'm going to be like a dog with a bone. Oops, don't do that. So, nice job, Jeff. Really. Do you feel okay about it? I can't tell from the way you're sitting there.
I don't know. We'll see. I think moving forward, some of the topics will, I don't know. It's interesting. Like what I have in mind to say versus what actually comes out. Or where I go.
You know what? We all do that.
I feel like I just stumble through things, but that's okay.
It didn't sound like you were. And honestly, I'm not one of these people who just says nice things. Alex can tell you that.
First of all, I don't believe that.
Well, it is.
But thank you.
It's really true. I mean, I'll just not say anything, but I won't lie to you.
You know, I think if I had, maybe I should look at, well, I think the next set, like the next sessions, I feel like I could just, I feel like that's a little different. I think in this case, what I should have done, Julie, if I was giving myself for my feedback to be more proactive and to really like, maybe even like talk a little bit more about the slides and what, with like prior to doing this. You know, I mean, I went through them, I go through, but I also like what you said this morning when we talked initially, you said